Protecting the secret place. That is today's video, and it is an expository sermon from Matthew chapter 6. Greetings, friends, and I am excited about sharing this with you. I want to start off by giving you a verse of scripture that will get us into this theme. Psalm 91:1 says, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." Well, these verses in Matthew 6 talk about this secret place. These are verses that Jesus said, and we will get into this chapter in just a moment. But Matthew 6 is a chapter where I have done videos here on this channel. You can go back and you can look at the video Seek God First, and that video talks about from verses 22 to 34 how we must refocus our vision to seek God first, realize our value, and to remember our victory. And that is a video you should go and look at for that information. Now, I also did a video on prayer, and that's one of the sections in Matthew chapter 6. And you can go back and look at that video, Pray Like Never Before. And that video talks about each aspect of that prayer when Jesus taught how to pray, how you address the Father, you adore His character, you anticipate His kingdom, ask for request, and acknowledge His kingship. All part of what is mentioned there in that prayer. Now, I also have a message that I have preached, but not a video here yet on this YouTube channel, on fasting. And I know that recently, as I'm recording this, there was Ash Wednesday that was the last Wednesday before this recording, and it is a commonly celebrated holiday of people who are fasting or giving things up for the purpose of thinking about Easter as Easter approaches 6.5 weeks from that day. Now, that is a message that I gave, though, from this chapter in 16 to 18. Verses 16 to 18 talk about welcoming the fast and watching your appearance and waiting for the reward. And that's a message that I've used in preaching. But I want to share this expository message today that really goes through the first 21 verses and focuses on that conjunction set of verses between what I did on seeking God first and the first part of this chapter. And the command that we have in this chapter really comes down in verses 19 to 21. But as I mentioned about the secret place, this is a place that you must protect, that you must have set aside for your time with the Creator God. And you individually can have that if you know Jesus Christ. But the verses here that Jesus talked about in Matthew 6, there are 3 times where he mentioned this idea of a secret place and doing what we do in secret. If you go to Matthew 6:4, you see the first occurrence. It says that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. So we see that first occurrence there in that section, which we'll look at more in a moment. The second one is in Matthew 6:6, and it says, "But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. So that's in that second section, which we will look at here again in just a moment. And the third time, when it talks about the secret or secret place, we see that in verse 18. And it says, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. So there you have the three sections which comprise the 3 points of how the proposition comes, which is found in verse 20. Verse 20 of Matthew 6 says, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. So friends, the proposition, the thing that is the thing you should focus on here is you must lay up treasures in heaven. Now, friends, we know they must be laid up in heaven because you can't take it with you. You have probably heard that a U-Haul does not follow a hearse. Well, that is saying that there's nothing when you die that you take with you except what you have sent ahead, what you have invested in heaven. And Jesus commanded that we lay up our treasures in heaven, in that secret place. So let's look at this chapter and what we can learn. In order to lay up treasures in heaven, we have to review those 3 themes that we used those verses before. And the first section in the first 4 verses talks about charitable deeds. Now, charity or charitable deeds, that is when you do things to help other people. That's when you help people in need and feed them or clothe them or provide for some need that they have. And Jesus assumes that this is something that we will be doing. We shouldn't be just so self-focused like so many people are, like it's natural, but our culture is filled with people self-focused. But we are supposed to be people who are giving toward others and doing charitable deeds. And naturally, we do want to just serve ourselves, but we're supposed to be living supernaturally so that we serve God, and that we do so only when we let Him live through us and help us to serve others. So the first point of how you can lay up treasure in heaven is to serve God freely. And this is found in verses 1 through 4. Now, we see right here in verse 1, the important thing. Let's read that. It says, take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So, friends, we must serve not to be seen. And we shouldn't be doing what we do for the sake of people. We're supposed to be serving God and doing so freely, not so that people will give us likes and clicks and applause and accolades for what we do. We're supposed to do it for God. So not to be seen. In verse 2, we see that we're supposed to serve not as a show. And that is where it says, therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound the trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. Friends, we are not supposed to serve God as a show. It is not supposed to be something that we make a big deal about for people to see, or a performance in what we do. It is supposed to be genuinely serving God by helping others freely in our lives. Now, we are not supposed to, that idea freely is the idea of what it says in verse 3. That says, "But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." Now, friends, that's just basically saying that you're not supposed to serve God as a study. In other words, you're not supposed to be thinking, well, will I serve him here or here? You're supposed to just serve freely. What you do to lay up treasure in that secret place is simply to serve God freely. And that's what these verses teach as Jesus gave them. And of course, we understand that when we serve God freely, we are doing so with a motive, a secret motive, which is what verse 4 talks about, that we serve secretly for God. And it says there in verse 4, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. So you should get the message here, friends. You can lay up treasure in heaven, not when you're serving yourself freely, but when you're serving God freely. And that is the first point here in verses 1 to 4. Now we come to verse 5, and that section goes all the way down to verse 15. And the point there is that we must, in order to lay up treasures in heaven, then we can do that when we seek God faithfully. The focus in these verses is prayer, and that is when we're seeking God for him to hear us in what we say, for us to praise him and just know him in prayer, and then to ask him for requests. And again, I did that video on how to pray, which you can get into some of these verses in detail there. But let me just get into a couple here. Verse 5 says, "And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward." So, friends, we are supposed to seek him, not to be seen. We're not supposed to be just looking to be seen by men like a hypocrite does, as he mentioned here, someone who says one thing and does another. God looks at our heart. He knows what goes on inside, and he knows whether we are seeking him faithfully. Now, we're also supposed to seek him, but not by all the things we say, not by a lot of words. And that's what he says in verse 7. That says, "And when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words." So, friends, we are supposed to seek God faithfully, but it's not seeking him just by repeating a bunch of words, not by saying something over and over. Vain repetitions like that somehow would get his attention. We seek God faithfully according to his will, and really genuinely from our heart. And of course, God knows the things we need that we ask for even before we ask. And that's what he says. Jesus said this in verse 8, where he says, "Therefore do not be like them, for your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask him." So, friends, we are supposed to seek God faithfully, and we're supposed to seek him secretly. And we see in verse 6 where Jesus said this. He says, "But you, when you pray, go into your room And when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. So, friends, it is to seek Him secretly, not to just be trying to make your prayers be seen by others or eloquently looked at as you as a spiritual person because people hear your prayers. You're supposed to have a prayer closet, a place where you seek God in secret in your mind and talking to Him. And of course, He promises to reward you openly when you do that. So this is a faithful way that you seek God. And he even talks about how to do so in your prayer. And this model prayer that He gave to the disciples here is basically, you can see that in verses 9 to 15. And I say this is when you seek Him in sanctity. So you're faithful when you seek God in sanctity, that is holiness. And verse 9 says, in this manner, therefore, pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. So that is sanctity, friends. That is taking this name of the Lord and sanctifying it and reverencing it, hallowing it as the name that is above all. So when you seek God faithfully, you will do so in these ways. You will do so by seeking Him not to be seen, by seeking Him not by all that you say, by seeking Him secretly, and by seeking Him in sanctity. And that is in verses 5 through 15. So then we come to the third point of how you can lay up treasures in heaven. We see this focused on in the section dealing with fasting, and that is verses 16 to 18. So we see that it is first talked about in verse 16, which says, moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites, with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. Friends, I could be doing a good message on they have their reward. I have talked about rewards that God gives us. Go look at the video that I did on the Bema seat. Or you could even go and look at the video where I talk about the judgment that will be on all people who haven't trusted Christ. The Bema seat is for those who have, and everyone else will be judged at the great white throne judgment. And I have a video discussing that too. But the reward that God promises is to give us according to how we do things, and we know that that is the judgment either as a believer or an unbeliever, that we have that reward according to the things written down that we've done or not done. So he says, when it comes to fasting, be sure that you are sacrificing, because a fast is when you give up your food, in particular, a certain type of food or food itself, to focus on a spiritual desire for God to do something. And fasting is something that is even used in a greater extent, in a general or broader way, to just refer to giving up something or sacrificing. So, friends, that is this third point of how you lay up treasure in heaven. It is that you sacrifice for God frequently. And as verse 16 says, the sacrifice or the fast is not for show. Do you see a theme here? It's in every point, whether he's talking about the charitable deed or praying or fasting. It's not supposed to be for show, so people can think of you as a spiritual person or something. That's not the purpose, and God knows your heart, whether you're doing it for people or you're doing it for Him. So, friends, your sacrifice is supposed to be not for show, and it's also supposed to be seeming normal. And that is what we see in verses 17 and 18. Verse 17 says, "But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face." So when a person's giving something up, they might be a little peaked. They're supposed to keep their head washed, their face clean, so that they don't look that way, so that they don't have people have pity on them or something because they're giving something up. Because remember, it's between you and God and what you want Him to do in that fast, in that sacrifice that you are making. So you're showing your seriousness there when you sacrifice, but it's supposed to just seem normal in what you do. And verse 18 goes on and says that too, following up, that so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. So the result of seeking Him, the result of laying up treasures in heaven, in that secret place where the Father dwells, where you can fellowship with Him, that treasure you lay up there is when you sacrifice for God because of the sacrifice that He made for you. Oh, Jesus Christ is the sacrifice for us. He is God the Son who became flesh, who gave His life on the cross, who was buried as dead after He had bore our sins on His body on the tree. And then He rose from the grave and He was victorious over death. But He sacrificed for you and for me. And we must put our trust, our faith in Him, what He did for us. But when we fast, we're supposed to sacrifice for God. And we're supposed to do that frequently. It's assumed that it's being done here in these verses, that when you fast, you're going to be sacrificing and giving up. So make sure you're doing it for God when you do it, and that you sacrifice your life as a living sacrifice to others, as Romans 12:2 says. So, friends, we see that there is the why that comes after the how you lay up treasures in heaven. Now we can go back to these verses in verse 19 and 21. Remember, our proposition came from verse 20. Well, the why is there too, why you should lay up treasures, because in verse 19 it says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal." So friends, why should you lay up treasure in heaven? Well, because if you lay it up on earth, it's going to be corrupted. Moths will come and eat up the clothing. Rust will come and decay, and things will break down. It may even be that what treasure you have will be known by others, and someone will come and want to take that treasure from you, so it might be captured. Why you should lay up treasure in heaven is because it won't be captured by any thief there, because it's in the secret place where you're doing it for God, and He knows, and He's keeping an account, a record. So friends, you don't lay it down on earth because it's corrupted and because it could be captured, but because your treasure, another reason why you would lay it up in heaven and not on the earth, is because it is connected to your heart. And that's what he says in verse 21. He says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Friends, what do you treasure? What is it that your heart is reflecting? Whatever you treasure, Jesus said, is where your heart will be. Our investment should not just be on the earth. Our investment should be in heaven, in this secret place, laying up treasures there in heaven. Oh, friends, invest for God more than you would just for yourself or any other thing. So again, concluding this wonderful passage that Jesus taught in his Sermon on the Mount, there in Matthew chapter 6, we see that verse 20 tells us that proposition, you must lay up treasures in heaven. How do you do that? Verses 1 through 4, you serve God freely. Verses 5 through 15, you seek God faithfully. And verses 16 through 18, you sacrifice for God frequently. Oh, friends, like this video, share it with others. These are the words of Jesus Christ. People need to know this and learn this because we all will give an account to Him. Like this video, share it with others, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you'll be ready for the next video as God leads me in what He wants me to say. Thank you for watching.